Everyone, this is Lori Barnes with Kepler College, and we are back with another episode of Let's Talk Astromapping. I am here with my co-host, Cindy McKeon, and we are honored with our guest today, Tamara McGillivray, who is our local space expert and our faculty member for local space at Kepler College. And Tamara did design the astromapping certificate along with Cindy. So very happy to have you here today, Tamara. Welcome, everyone. Cindy, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I'm excited because we don't talk enough about local space, and Tamara is the expert on local space astrology and Compass astrology. So it's going to be very fascinating, and you guys are going to be hooked to your screens.
So why don't we just start off with what is local space? I think there are some people in our audience who may not know what it is yet. So if you could give kind of like an overview of what it is, that would be great, Tamara.
It is my favorite astrology to practice because it's so personalized. It is how we express our planets out into the world. So we are all walking, talking universes, and we have this particular makeup and aspects that come with our being on how things relate in our own mind, how we use them, how we access them, and then how do we project them into the world and the feedback that we get from that projection. So if I'm sitting across from somebody that is sitting on my Mars line, what kind of feedback am I getting from that? It is about me. Like, when you say it's not about you, it's about me, it's my fault. It is my fault because I'm the one projecting that energy. But of course, there's a reciprocal thing going on. Where's your Mars line and all that too. But what I love about Compass Astrology is that literally we can get this feedback and improve our projection, improve who we are, improve how everything is working. And you can do it by shifting things within your own environment. You can do it by going to a different grocery store that isn't on your Neptune line. So you're buying all this crap coming home and it's all full of cookies as opposed to veggies. So it's actually using your environment in a reciprocal way as this feedback loop, and even your relationships, people that you're working with. And here, where are you sitting in your own office as we're talking in this environment and sharing knowledge and all of that. So I just love it because it is such a loop feedback that we really can dial into. Here's the chart. It's stationary. You're born with this. This is your natal information. This is your blueprint. But then how is it on Earth? Are these planets dropping on Earth? Like 3D way or a 4D way if you want to use time. But, in a 3D way where my world is expressing this chart based on these planets as they're dropping onto the Earth. So that's really what local space is all about and what Compass astrology is all about. It's about walking on the Earth and feeling the energy and understanding the energy and then taking it to its highest level. How can I improve upon this? How can I be a better human being based on this feedback that I'm getting? Of course, it's all within your natal chart. It's not like outside of you, it's in you, it's you. And then how you're going to, work with that energy.
And don't you say feet on the ground astrology?
Feet on the ground astrology. It's you embodied. So here's the design, here's the blueprint. We have even, if we think about our energetic bodies, we have a blueprint, but then it filters down into this dense energy and filters down to the feet on the ground. What am I doing? What vibrations am I putting out and getting back? And how am I utilizing that in a physical sense? So the very dense energy on Earth.
And I love that it goes with you wherever you are, right? When we look at astrocartography, the lines, they're static, but local space, wherever you go, then your local space chart, your compass chart moves with you. So it can be very useful in terms of your space.
And something really exciting about that doesn't happen in any other astrology is that your aspect lines change. This is the only place where, like, you could be born with this. All aspects are good aspects that you grow from them. But let's say you've got this grand cross. It's a work in progress. And then some transit comes by, lights it up, and you're like, oh my God, I'm falling apart. Can you shift that energy? Well, maybe you can't move, but you can shift your awareness within your own local space. Maybe you can move. Maybe you can go on a vacation. Maybe you can go visit your sister, go visit your mom, go visit a friend at the other end of the country and get those aspects to change for a little while so that maybe you get some relief from it. Maybe like that thing about having a band-aid, you've got the band-aid, it holds you together. But, if you can actually work on the underlying issue and then come back, because that Grand Cross has a reason for being there. It's helping you grow in some way. You're going to utilize that energy. But it's nice to have a little break from it every once in a while, or just be super aware of it in your environment, make that shift so that it's not so hard today. I can wake up and maybe work on it a different way today.
Or remediate it. I know you teach a whole class on
Remediate. Yeah,
remediation for those types of things.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Your lines are what you see changing. But the truth is, as you change your location, you're changing your perspective of the sky.
Yeah.
So that's how those geospatial aspects change. Sometimes it could be as little as 3 miles just to change an aspect. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and
Absolutely.
share some slides. Tamara made slides for us today, so we're going to take a look.
So you've got your natal chart, you've got what that natal promise is, what angular mapping, the ACG lines and local space horizon astrology, it adds depth to this information. And I actually think that there are secrets held within the world that help us understand who we are. And it's happened to me, it's happened to clients where you see where this line crosses over something really interesting in the world. And you realize that, oh my God, that's a piece of information that I've got built in. And when I connect to that, it creates this depth of knowledge of who I am, where I'm going, and how I'm doing things. And that's what I really love about mapping, all the mapping techniques, that they provide this depth of knowledge that we can't get from, anywhere else in astrology. So that's what excites me.
I think we've covered a lot of this today.
We did. We did. Feet on the ground, the embodied experience, and the aspect change, which I think is really incredible
Yeah.
and something a lot of people don't tap into.
Why is that, Tamara? If I know that's probably a big question and a quite a
Yeah.
technical answer, but if you could kind of narrow it down to how the aspects in your natal chart why do they change, or how can they change in a compass chart?
So, really, this is something that Cindy teaches, and that is the astronomy. It's the planets as they, hit the atmosphere, drop down onto the earth. Our perspective, like Cindy said, about how we see, how we're experiencing that energy, that allows this change to happen. So, where was this static natal chart? Literally, as you move across the globe, these planets are dropping down in different positions and you're getting this different perspective. So I just wanted to show you that it has its own look. For those who follow the AstroMapping, the ACG, they know that you've got these lines, some of them curved, some of them are, straight up and down on the map. But with local space, literally, as I was talking about, this is you, this blue dot is you, and this is the energy of the planets as they move out across the world. Now, when I use this technique, this local space technique, really, I'm using this on the place of birth. So this is where you're mapping those local space lines. This is your geotag. This is you, where you're born and how you're sending your information out, this feedback. And this is on an earthly basis. So yes, you can meet people. You can marry somebody that maybe, has lines genetically that match these or some historical information. But really, this is a reciprocal book of information on a deeper level of yourself. So these lines going out across the world, it's connected to the earth, it's connected to the stories of the earth, and it's going to feed back information to you. It opens up a part of you. The thing is that naturally we're drawn to these things, but sometimes we don't know why we're drawn to them. And this helps us explore that, and it helps us create a deeper connection to that information that it's feeding back to us from the earth, because she knows everything. So there's lots of things we can do with these. They're insights into potential, like I've been talking about, lights up those areas of interest, maybe deeper study that you can go into. And you can use it, as Lori had said, we use it as a goal setting tool for remedial measures. So local space lines, come right down into our environment. And then we can put them on a compass with the north, east, west, south. And we can actually start to use that compass in a way similar to feng shui. I really think that it is actually deeper than that because it's my personal energy signature that I'm putting into my environment and then getting the feedback. Feng shui is a very ancient, beautiful technique. Vastu is another one that's a very ancient, beautiful technique that gives us this incredible feedback. And we have in the Western world, we have local space. This is what I'm talking about, the wonders of the world. Wouldn't you love to know, map your lines out across the world? Does something cross over the Great Pyramids? Is something in one of the wonders of the world? And you're like, why have I always been connected to that? I know I've got, is it a past life? It's this connection through this line to this deeper information. And then you can dive into that. And then maybe you do other energetic work and you're like, wow, do I ever have a connection to this particular place? So, using local space as a personal guide, as a compass in your own area. And we talked a little bit about this. Where's your grocery store? Where's your gym? Having the lines mapped in my area here. One line for one gym was my Mars line, which of course is a great gym. I didn't really connect to that. I was like, oh, I like this gym over here because there's friends that, I like to go with to the gym. That was my Neptune line. But every time I went to the gym, somebody would engage me in some deep spiritual conversation. And I'd be like, I don't want to talk spirit. I want to talk body. I was like, okay, I can't go to that gym anymore. Even though it's a lovely gym, I'm going to have to go to this gym and engage in my body because that's what that goal is or that focal point is. So it's like knowing in your environment where the best places for you and why. A place where I'm doing meditation or getting body healing or, something like that at the Neptune line. So using the lines appropriately so you get the most bang for your buck. And this is one of my favorite pictures, I guess we'll say, where I'm trying to show you that, we are all walking, talking universes. We have this whole planetary blueprint that we come with, that we're connected to these planets in a very deep way. And what story are they telling us? And of course, with local space and astromapping, you still need to be a good astrologer. Just because you study astromapping does not make you a good mapper. You have to have the astrological skill. You have to understand what the aspects are, how they're talking to each other, deepen the understanding of the natal chart before you map your lines, that this is all part of it.
In local space, you're really applying your chart, or this is the practical application, right? We study
Yes.
astrology, we learn about our chart so that we can hopefully improve our outcomes. And I think that's one of the
Yes.
reasons why I love local space so much, is it's just rich with that application.
Yes, no two Mars lines are created equally. Your Mars line and my Mars line are very different in their core expression. The essential nature of Mars is always the essential nature, but how Mars accesses those tools are very different for you than it is for me. And the practical application, not only can I utilize that Mars line and know that if I want to do a Mars activity, focusing on that Mars line is going to help bring that energy up to the surface, but also knowing that I can tap into the tools of my Mars line and how my Mars accesses its essential nature and the feedback that provides me. So if my Mars line is, I've got a gym upstairs. If my Mars line is running through my gym, which it is, because that's why the gym is there, my personal gym, if I can barely get in the door because it's full of stuff as opposed to exercise equipment, right? Then it's telling me, Houston, there's a problem. What's going on with your Mars line? What feedback are you getting from that? If you have a huge pile of books or a broken computer and it's sitting on your Mercury line, what does that tell you about your Mercury line? Well, first of all, you have to understand your Mercury line. How is Mercury? How is your ability to communicate? How are you accessing it? What tools do you have to communicate? And then to understand what that feedback is coming from that particular line in your environment.
Yeah, and if you had a client who did have the piles of unorganized books and the broken radio, and they were coming to see you about a Mercury goal, then,
Yes.
right, that you would work with them on how to rearrange that space, right?
Absolutely. And it's going to be so powerful because the client's going to feel it right away. It's not like something that's going to take them 2 or 3 years. As soon as you hone in on, there's the problem. The mercury line is clogged. Maybe there's a block. Maybe the TV is there and they can't get into the written material because they're distracted by the TV. Well, let's move that TV. Let's make that a reading space instead. And immediately, as soon as the client does that, they're going to feel the reciprocal portion of that. They're going to get the feedback. Their mercury is going to free up. It's going to start accessing its essential nature and it's going to be happy. So, this is something that you'll learn in my class, and that is starting to work with these little, I call them hotspots. They have many names. Sometimes people call them destiny points, but it's a hotspot. And it's a very important piece of information in utilizing sort of that crossover technique where you're using local space and ACG and you're finding these little hotspots and then figuring out what they tell you. And again, I just wanted to show you some of that information on which grocery store, which dentist, which doctor, which gym, where are you going to thrive? That's the whole point in the practical application, Lori, of using local space. Because
Yeah,
we want to thrive. I mean, we're here to thrive. We're here to enjoy our lives. We're here to experience. And these lines will help us open to that and understand, sort of that feedback that we're getting.
I'm sure that some of our audience is looking at this and thinking, how do I get my local space chart on a map?
Yeah.
What programs will you be able to see a local space chart?
All of them. They all have this special local space. Now, how you get there, each one has their secrets to pulling this map up. But, we do have different videos on how to access its information in our classes, because we don't want technology to be the obstacle. And they all have something that they offer. We all use multiple programs because they all give us a little tidbit that something else doesn't give us. They all do this. It's just finding the right buttons to push and then, getting over the technical hurdle and getting into what is the meaning of this.
I
Right.
could point out how you could do it even without astrology software. If you
Mm.
go into astronomy software for the date and the time that you were born, and you search for those planets on the azimuth, you could mark them down that way too.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I know Cindy has software out there as well that does it. I just want to give a little plug. And I will say, if you're a student of Kepler College and you're listening to this, there is a library of tutorials that Tamara has put together, and you have access to that in the online classroom or Moodle classroom. And if that's something you want access to, if you take any of our astromapping classes, you will get access to that library of instructional videos for software.
At Kepler College, you often get a Kepler College student discount for the software you want to buy.
Yes. Thank you for
Yeah,
mentioning.
that's a great point, Cindy. Absolutely. Some people are looking at this going, what in the heck is that? What I wanted to show you was one picture, and many of the different softwares have a different look to this. Not too far off from this, but at least some part of it. And this is actually putting it into the compass, and we call it Compass Astrology because literally it works with our north, south, east, and west. And the fun thing about this, I love Michael J's chart here because it shows us these aspect lines I'm talking about, where I'm saying if you're in different places. So that top one there is Vancouver. He was born near Vancouver, Canada. And you can see the aspect lines in the center. And then if you move to New York or you move to the near Thousand Oaks, that in the San Diego or LA area, because those are places that he has been to or traveled a lot or lived in, you can see those aspects have actually changed. So you might see some extra aspect lines or that there's some missing from the original blueprint, which is his Vancouver blueprint. You move to a place and you think, oh, the ACG line is beautiful. Oh, it's my Jupiter line. It's a beautiful Jupiter line and everything is wonderful. And then you get there and you're like, oh my God, this is the hardest place I've ever had to live. But you didn't look at the compass to see what are the aspects in the compass and do you need to make some adjustments? Maybe instead of living in East LA, maybe you'll move to West LA because maybe that will free up or help or connect something. And also, this idea that we're born with this blueprint, but maybe when we move to LA, some other aspect comes up. And that's why we are now famous, where we weren't famous at home. This is like the extra boost that we needed. And you don't have to move there. Maybe you are remote accessing, which Cindy loves to teach about remote accessing. So there's other ways of connecting into this energy, but knowing that you've got those aspect lines there, knowing that they're going to shift, isn't knowing 90% of the battle. And then the other 10% is, okay, what am I going to do with this?
This is all taken mostly from the West Coast. So his moves are more significant going north and south. And you could see the differences in the perspective of how he views those planets and how it changes the aspects. Imagine if he moved over to the East Coast, say he's filming in New York or Connecticut, that would be an even more significant change that he'll see in the planet. Even if he goes from Vancouver all the way on the same latitude, but to a more eastern longitude, you'll definitely see those differences.
Yeah.
Or if you're going to vacation in Europe and you are wondering what your experience is going to look. So it's not just the ACG line. It's also, feet on the ground. What am I feeling when I'm there? What kind of feedback am I going to get? Where's the best croissant shop? Which one should I choose? Oh, I'm going to choose the one that's on my Venus line if my Venus is in good shape, of course. If my Venus is happy, then she's going to want the best croissant, and therefore I shall, head out to experience that, or the best healer, or the best, where am I going to get the best healing for myself? Where am I going to get the best experience for myself?
And the other thing is if you move north or south of the equator, how that changes, where on the compass
Huge.
those planets will show up.
Yeah, it's a huge change when you move up and down over the. And then I wanted to do some fun pictures where, just what we're talking about, laying that compass in your hometown or in a small town that you're going to go visit, or even, visiting towns based on, so here's my hometown. This is the energy I'm putting out. And, what kind of experience am I going to have if me and the dogs go for a drive and we visit other, dog parks and we go to other places and, what are we going to experience? So this was just a fun picture I thought I would create. And of course, here's a picture as if you were in an office, how you might change the furniture. And if people are taking my classes, they know I change my furniture a lot, especially in my office. I like to experience, different things based on different things I'm working on at the time. If I feel that I need to be more serious and focused, you'll find me here. If I'm doing something more creative, you'll find, that I'm working over on my Neptune line. So it's like, how can I best utilize this energy in my own space? This is like, who wants their Mercury line on that line of papers? No way. You get some Saturn over there, like switch that desk to a Saturn line, get those papers off that desk. It can create blocks. And yet, there are times, and this is actually something that does happen to me, where I love sitting on my Neptune line, but if I'm there too long, I will end up with stacks of paper, stacks of stuff, either that I've gathered it or I don't know how it gets there. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? I need to move my desk and I'll move it over to my Saturn line or over to my Mercury line. And I will get myself reorganized. And again, if you can have more than one desk in your office, I actually have my Neptune line. I've got a standing desk over there where I can do some creative work. This is where I hunker down, write papers, create classes, work on my computer, and then there's some stuff that happens over there on my Sun and my Mercury line. And of course, this goes through your whole house. This isn't just one room. And then let's make it difficult. I'm not the only person that lives here,
Ah,
right? How am I interacting with everyone else and how are our lines working? So this is just another fun view of some of those things that can happen in your office. And yes, you can start to work on very deep levels with charting goals, doing altars. An altar is just a focal point. Whatever you put on that altar is going to be very personalized to you, and working with remedial measures. Now, of course, remedial measures are something that you want to be very careful about. You don't just whip out a remedial measure. I mean, maybe to yourself, not to a client. If you want to try it on yourself, go right ahead. But for a client, you want to be very careful about how you plan these remedial measures, how you work with your client on remedial measures. You really don't want negative results from this. And that's when you really need to know the chart. You really need to know the astrology and then, using this as a practical application to that astrology. So this is just another fun picture. And there we have Compass Astrology.
would you talk about or contrast and compare the relocation chart and then a local space or a compass chart and how one might go about using them?
There you're starting to layer things. When we're looking at layering of charts, we can layer the solar return, we can layer the transits, we can layer, your relocated chart to see what's going on in that as well. But really, this compass chart goes with you wherever you go. So it is really like feet on the ground, projection out. What am I really feeling? The relocated chart and the solar return and all those charts are more about layering information. And then your compass chart is like, where is this happening in my world? How am I projecting this out? And what kind of feedback can I get?
Tamara, what is your opinion on when you're speaking of layering? Do you tend to look at your natal local space first and the way that projects out and keeping that in mind, but then when you relocate it, how do you layer those two together? Say if someone was like moved from the Pacific Northwest down to Florida, which is quite a significant change. And a lot of those lines may or may not overlap. Which ones would you tell them to primarily use? Which one is innately them?
Our natal chart is Cindy's line, our geotag. It's where we land. It's our foundational energy. But as we move around, as we experience other things, as we layer other things on, that is like maybe the expansion of who we are, the expansion of our experiences. And so I'm always going to look at natal first. And let's say, I moved to Florida and that is my local space Venus line. That's going to be this underlying foundational energy. And then I'm going to layer on top of that, how am I experiencing the energy of my compass on top of that? It's a very layered thing. And that's why we need to become very good astrologers in order to do this work, because we need to understand, what's the primary chart? How is that solar return influencing me this year? How can I see that projection? What is the compass chart? What is the ACG? And how do you really work with those layers and layers of information? Because that gets really deep into somebody's, personal psyche, into how they're expressing themselves in this human form in this moment in time. That's why we want to be great astrologers. We want to really understand the makeup, and then we want to understand how do we use these techniques over top of that. But for me, it's, natal is always the base foundation. It's who we are. And then how do we expand that and because we're all travelers now, nobody stays put. I've lived all over, from one end of the country to the other. I've experienced those changes and I've traveled not all over the world, but many places. Cindy has traveled many places. Lori's traveled many places. This gives us experience in how those things may play out. Understanding that base foundations of astrology is great, but the experience of, when I went there, this is exactly what happened. And this is why, and this is how I can help my client who's about to experience that big move, and bring that experience to the table.
I think you're right, Tamara, about the experience with travel, but it's also, in my opinion, the experience with actually living somewhere more than a whole solar cycle. In other words, a year, because you really do get to experience the full maturation of that planetary line. And you could speak from all 12 aspects of that maturation, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Even in transit, how many times does the sun, revolve around and hit every different thing in your chart? And you get an experience from that every time. And when you live in a place, like most places, I've lived at least 11 years. I mean, my birthplace was a lot longer, but most places it's been 11 years or more. You really do get this deep understanding of when those planets mature in that area, how you really are utilizing that energy and opportunities and the obstacles that can come with that as well.
Well, that's beautiful because if you've lived there at least 11 years, that is saying that you've lived there for a whole Jupiter cycle, which brings
A whole
even more of
Jupiter.
that knowledge, that higher learning, the philosophy, and the whole like beyond what you could actually see within a year, essentially. That's the whole like Jupiterian knowledge point, right?
Yes, yes. And interestingly, I've lived here just 11 years, just over 11 years. Like I think I've actually hit my 12th year. So, is a move in play? No, it's not. But I never say never because you just never know.
Tamara, can you talk to us a little bit about, because what I understand from where you live, you could actually see sunrise and sunset. You could see planets rising on that ecliptic, hitting the midheaven or its meridian, the highest point, and then setting. Can you talk to us a bit more about that and how that
So, well,
plays a role in your interpretations?
yeah, well, that happens when I'm in the summer, when I'm in PEI. I actually do. I have the view of the rising on the water and the setting on the water. It's a really cool place there. So, connecting with the night sky, there's nothing like it. You can do it on the computer, but there's nothing like walking out and actually experiencing. And, the wonderful thing is every night when I go to bed, Venus, she's beautiful in the sky. She's in this beautiful view of my window. So just like connecting to that planetary energy and knowing who she is in, what she's representing in my chart and how I'm expressing that energy of peace and harmony and relationships and connections and balance, all those beautiful things that she brings to us. Things we value, things we love. I value astrology. I value the night sky. I value beauty in nature, all those things that she brings us. So, yeah, that's step outside, get a feel for, and then like connect that to your chart. Don't just look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's Venus. It's like, yeah, well, how does Venus express itself in me? What is her essential nature doing for me? And then connect to that beautiful, powerful energy as she comes up. And sometimes it's more powerful than others, right, Cindy? Like sometimes we feel certain planets more powerfully because they're rising up. We're getting this full on feeling of them as opposed to the ones that, are still below the surface that never sort of rise for us in that way.
Yeah. And if you
Yes.
want to see what that looks like, I just had the pleasure of taking the astronomy for astromapping, and it's so cool to see that in the horary chart and really get the feel for where was this planet in the sky. It's one thing to look at that 2D flat chart, but it's another thing
Yeah.
to really look at all of the planets at a specific time, a date. It was awesome to be able to do that.
And I
Yeah.
say the easiest thing to start with, and the first thing I highly recommend to start with, just start tracking the sun. That way you
Hmm.
start getting used to where the ecliptic rising and setting is, because that's where all the planets are pretty much going to be coming up and hitting the top of the sky and then settling. So during the daytime, you're getting that activation from the most luminous body that we have in the sky. And you can even see the sun. You feel it even when it's overcast, but sometimes you could even see the moon in the sky during the daytime as well,
Hmm.
and how you could connect with that.
Yeah.
And underline what Tamara was saying, and this goes very much with her local space class. Local space, a lot of it does have to do with intention too. And how is it that you connect with the planet? Tamara, can I share a little story about how I connected with a planet that was very important to me recently? So,
Yes.
as a Taurus, is ruled by Venus. And as it just happened this year, right on my birthday, Venus was going to be at her brightest that she will be for about the next 2 years or so. Up until around maybe November 2026, you'll see her just as bright. And it was coming up in the morning sky. I actually got up at 4:30 in the morning and made sure I got to the edge of the city, which was thankfully not too far where the lake is, at 4:45, and I was able to watch her rise before the sun and see how bright she is and the path that she was taking. And I put a lot of Venusian intention into it. What do I want to get out of Venus? What do I not want to get out of Venus? When we do our planetary intentions, sometimes we forget what the shadow sides of it are. And we could try to filter for that. What do you think about that, Tamara, filtering in the shadow side of planets, or Lori?
Well, I'll have a shorter answer than Tamara. And one of the things that I believe in is the use of words. There's a whole, science behind that, the NLP, neuro linguistic programming. And I tend to favor saying what I want and not what I don't want, because if you say what you don't want, you're still saying the words and it's still using the law of attraction. I do think it's important to do what you said, Cindy, to know what you don't want, and then you flip it to the positive. So if this isn't what you want, then what's the opposite, and how can I say that? And that's what I would stick with personally. Tamara?
I mean, you can take that into your landscape as well. So at the same time, Cindy would look at what her Venus line looks like in her home. If she's trying to shine the light on that Venus, maybe she's literally going to put a light on her Venus line to make it as bright as possible so that she can see into all the dark corners about, that Venus. Because yes, Venus does have a shadow side as well, but that's the side of growth. So it's not that we want to ignore it. We want to like shine the light on it and say, okay, what are the obstacles that I have to achieve my highest goals with Venus? And that's beautiful when you can get out there and experience the rising of that Venus and connect to her energy. You're connecting obviously to your own inner level of Venus as well. And that is what's beautiful about my summer experiences, seeing the sun come up over the horizon and then set. And they're so different. The rising of the sun and the experience you have from that is so different from the setting, especially in this particular area because it's both over water. They're both like they're within my view, the whole horizon of the rising and the setting, but the colors are so different. The experiencing the sun as it rises up and it's so bright and it's a blue sky and it feels light, and then when it's setting, it's, there's all this color and depth because, it was there the whole day, right? So you've experienced that whole conscious level of the sun all day long. You've been running around experiencing in the physical body. And then as it sets, you've now got all this coloring and depth and experience and interest in that setting and experiencing that as it, slips below the surface. And then, obviously the lunar comes up and you experience that. We live on a beautiful, incredible planet. And I think astrology and especially local space can really help us experience that. It can help us take that moment of living in the moment, living in the now, looking up and understanding what that planet is actually telling us, what that energy is actually telling us in our life.
So, Tamara, I know that you teach local space and then remediation using local space. What terms do you teach those classes?
And I also teach AM 200 as well, which is the ACG. Yeah, I
Yeah,
teach that as
yeah.
well.
Tell our
I
audience
co-teach
what
it.
classes you teach and then which term, because year to year the date may change, but they tend to be
Yes, the
the same term.
term always stays the same. Well, I mean, it's, as in the foreseeable future, the term always stays the same. So my local space compass class is always in the summer. I believe it's the first part of the term this summer. So it's the first portion of the summer term. And my remedial class is always in the fall, and it's usually the second part of the term. So you can check for that. And you cannot, I will tell you, you cannot take the remedial class if you didn't do the local space class. The remedial class isn't for general remedial, even though, I mean, remedials are remedials, but we really use that compass in order to apply those remedials. So that's why it kind of goes hand in hand. That's why I teach them together. And then, of course, AM 200, which is learning the deeper part of the general ACG, of the general lines across the world, is in the winter. And it's a 10-week class. So it starts at the very beginning of the winter term and goes for the whole winter term. And that you're going to get a little tidbit of everything. You know, you're going to get like a good overview of all of the tools and techniques we have. And then, of course, we have all of our other mapping classes in that certificate that deepens the knowledge. Cindy is teaching the astronomy class, and you're going to be having a class up and coming as well next year. So we're going to see that. We can keep it a bit of a secret for now, but let people know that we've got something up and coming, and it's going to be fantastic. And we've got transits coming up, actually, a brand new class on transits and progressions taught by Kanan. He's going to teach that in the fall. So we're going to have that class up and running in the fall. He is brilliant. He's so personable. You're going to have so much fun in that class. And of course, we've got Ralph actually teaching in the last half of the summer for geodetics. Teaches again in the winter, actually, for geodetics as well. We've got Ariel Gutman that's going to be teaching in the winter class as well on her, we'll call it a deeper dive, where she goes into some areas in a very deep levels. And we're developing more classes as we go. This is a very rich technique area that we are developing, and we love bringing it to you guys. So we hope to see everyone at our classes and have lots of fun. With the Compass class, you need to have astrological knowledge. You need to know the planets. You need to understand the natal chart. But it is like a fairly beginner class. Like you don't need to have all of your ACG, to take this local space summer class. You do need to have some chops in natal astrology. But, really, it's a technique unto itself. So therefore, you can come into this class, even if it's your first mapping class and you haven't done other mapping classes. And then, of course, you're going to get the big hook, and you'll be taking them all because it's such a fascinating area of study.
Yeah, it really is. I know there's a couple of more classes that Cindy teaches. Do you want to talk about
Yes.
those?
AM 100 is the very basic foundation for the overview of anything to do with the astrological part of AstroMapping. It's not a required course, and even if you come in with a fair amount of experience and knowledge, as a Taurus myself, I'm going to be biased and tell you I believe in solid foundations. And that is the only course that we go very deeply into remote activation, because we understand that many of you can't move or you can't travel at this moment. But we show you how to harness the power of planetary lines, even if you can't get to that location. And you, in turn, will know how to do that with your clients as well. I mean, I'm teaching it, so I'm just going to say it's a beautiful class. I teach it with love, too. And speaking of beauty, one of the things I wanted to talk about with the AstroMapping certificate and all of the courses that go into it at Kepler College, part of the beauty of it is that how we teach in these different layers to get you to where you want to go as an expert, as a master, as a professional yourself. This is the whole sky we're learning about. It's very vast, and we're bringing it down to us as humans, very complex creatures. How are we going to learn that in only a few weeks? But once you start to get the foundation and you start to build up from there, it starts to get a lot more intuitive, a lot more inherent. And that's why I think that it's so beautiful. Furthermore, you get so many different professors and instructors, so many different interactions, and you get the benefit of the community in our program, where it's not only the students in your class, but other students from other classes that we manage together in WhatsApp and how they help each other. So I can go on and on, but do you, Tamara or Lori, have anything else to talk about with the beauty of the program?
I have taken all of the classes but one at this point, and it's excellent, and I can't recommend it more highly. I will say that Kepler College has an open house every term. It's a live in-person event, and if we have piqued your interest, and I hope that we have, feel free to bring any questions you have to our open house. So every 3 months there is one, and if you have questions, you can come in there and ask away. We usually have a representative from the different certificates there that can answer questions. So I think that we can wrap it up today. We really appreciate having Tamara as our guest today. Of course, we'll be back with more Let's Talk Astromapping videos in the future. And we appreciate comments and feedback and requests. If you have any requests, please feel free to leave that in the comments below. So we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.